I was already kind of asking some questions about how you found out about us or how you came to be here, but another thing that's very helpful for me to guide our discussion and the level of detail is to have an understanding of how much you know already about functional medicine. So if we were to imagine, I guess, a 1 to 10 scale, and 1 is, I know a little, I came willingly, the person next to me dragged me here, but I'm open-minded. So that's kind of our lowest level there. And then 10 is, I have been researching this stuff, studying up on it for decades. I could probably teach the class. I'm not quite sure who you are, if that's our 10. Where do you find yourself on that scale tonight?
I'm probably a 1.
A 1. Wow, a 1 who was searching. How did you even know what to search for?
I was looking for naturopathic
Okay.
stuff. I'm
Got
not
it.
sure what this is, so.
Then that'll be part of tonight to shed some light on that. Anybody else?
I'm a 2.
A 2.
Yeah, 1 better than him.
And it's not a competition.
Probably 2.
2.
Maybe a 7 or an 8.
7 or 8. Okay, good. So you obviously are well versed in some of these things. All right, so the purpose of tonight is really twofold. And you didn't get to answer. Did you want to answer?
I'd say a 2 or a 3.
Okay, so 1 better than you.
That's definitely true.
There you go. The purpose of tonight is really twofold. 1 is to talk a little more about that. So it's nice that so many of you are just in this initial discovery period. What is functional medicine? How is it different from what we call here reactive care? And then in addition to that, what is it like to be a patient here? Because one of the things we know from, I mean, we've been at this for now 15 years, but we certainly had a period where we didn't have an introduction session or an information session like this. So we've seen what it's like to just understand a little bit more before signing up. And we know that there's a direct correlation between your satisfaction here as a patient and just knowing sort of what you're signing up for in advance. So the goal tonight is to really have you leave here with whatever you need to know to understand whether this is a good fit for you and for your family. So we will talk about functional medicine, how it's different from other types of care, and we will also talk about the patient experience and what it's like to be a patient here. And that includes things like timing and frequency of appointments, how long they last, who do you meet with, what sorts of services you would have access to. We'll talk some about money. If you were to be able, when you leave here tonight, to say, you know what, that was a good use of an hour and a half or so of a Monday night, what are some of the other things that you would want to have had covered in order to be able to say that? What were you hoping to find out as you made your way here tonight? Hi.
I brought my other child.
I got it. I saw a familiar face in the crowd. Then she might just be able to help me right along with the show tonight. Maybe. What were some of the things you're hoping to find out?
If this works with my insurance.
Okay, so we will talk. We're a self-pay clinic, so we'll talk about kind of all of the things that means and all the ways that works for people financially. What options are available?
What about after hours care?
After hours care. What are our hours? When are we open? What do we do during those hours? All those things. Anything else that you find it would be beneficial for you to know? All right, let me just start with a few slides that I feel like are just a general commentary on what's happening in the world around us. What's happening in the world of, I guess, wellness and healthcare in America. So we currently spend, and this is per capita and in aggregate, more on healthcare than any other industrialized nation. Yet we rank about 37th, give or take a ranking every time this study comes out, in overall quality of care, and that's according to the World Health Organization, which obviously many people trust information coming from that source. 50% of bankruptcy filings actually happen as a result of medical expenses. Health insurance premiums are increasing 3 times more quickly than average wage. And nearly half of all of us take 1 or more prescriptions on a daily basis. So short story on this slide is we're spending a lot of money. Questionable whether or not that money is being put to good use. And we're taking an increasing number of pills to solve for all those ills. So you'll hear people often talk about reactive care as a pill for an ill. In that kind of care, you have 2 tools in the toolkit. You have pills and you have surgery. And by the way, I don't I think that there's a very good reason that all of that life-saving technology exists. If I'm in a car accident leaving here, as obviously some people were tonight, don't bring me back. For urgent and emergent care, reactive medicine does good work. But where we have lost our way a bit is in this world of chronic disease, where this approach of a pill for an ill just isn't working for people. And so functional medicine, which I'll refer to as proactive care, which is obviously the opposite or something different from reactive care, is a different approach to some of the things that are trying to be solved around us in ways that are not really all that effective. Now, there's a couple of key words here, or more medications on a daily basis. I don't watch TV all that much, but if I do, it's after my kiddos go to bed. So it's usually like in that prime time, kind of after 9 time frame. And almost every single evening, if we're not watching something that's recorded or on a DVD, I am stunned, although I don't know why I continue to be, at the number of pharmaceutical ads. I felt like last night, between pharmaceutical ads and insurance of some sort, which are, by the way, increasingly silly in my perspective, so Geico and some of these other ones, there really isn't much else being advertised. It's really fascinating. And when you get to the end of those ads, and really teeny tiny print and usually really quick talking, what do they talk about? I'm seeing you nod.
Just all the side effects.
Yeah, all the things that could happen if I take this. Anywhere from headaches, death is usually in the list, oily discharge, which I sometimes wonder if that's not worse than whatever you're taking it for, correct? So I remember elbowing my husband at one point and going, really? This is what's happening out there, and I'm just supposed to ask my doctor about, and we're taking now pills that have side effects. And if I take something and I can't sleep, what do I now have to do? Yeah, take a sleeping pill. And if I take something and now I can't go, what do I have to do?
Take the go pill.
Take the go pill. It's gonna have a new name. Right. And so people come through these doors on a veritable cocktail of medications routinely. Now, interestingly, as all of those things have been changing in terms of how much money we're spending on medical care, at the same time, something interesting has been happening with the way we feed the machine. The way we fuel this beast. Very sophisticated piece of equipment, by the way, with which we have been entrusted. 1 out of every 4 Americans reports eating fast food every single day. French fries are officially the most commonly eaten vegetable. Americans eat out 40% of meals. 20% of those meals are consumed in our vehicles. And we consume 31% more processed food than we do real food. So if you start to think about it, taking a lot of stuff, yes. I would not be putting slides up here with information that was not scientifically proven. So we're spending more and more money. And at the same time, as we look back and think about how we've been feeding the machine, I would say that we could all agree that that's probably been deteriorating. Now, I will also say, as a human being that lives in the same world in which you do, I also understand why that's happening. Because we are more busy than we ever have been. And so I have had many of those moments where I've got about 15 minutes between picking up the kids from somewhere and getting them on to their next thing, or a board meeting, or work, or classes we're taking, or things that we're involved with. So many of us are stretched. And if a bulletproof coffee or a smoothie counts, I absolutely eat breakfast in my car many, many days. So I can appreciate why that's happening. Busy is in fact the new fine, the new normal. So what happens here is we're helping people rethink about the importance of nutrition, the importance of how we fuel the machine, the fact that nutrition, food, absolutely does have something to do with how the machine behaves, and then helping people work through how we can make something different a reality and still have that work within their busy life. Now, someone in one of these classes, I think it's probably been about 3 to 4 months ago at this point, said to me, Christina, what do you think people would do if when they got their very first vehicle, they were told that that was the only one they would ever get? How do you think they would treat that car? Not rhetorical. What do you think? What do you think people would do?
Like it was a diamond.
Right, like it was a diamond. Garage kept. As they say where I'm from, in the South, spit shined. My children would certainly not be eating inside of it. There would never be a situation where I would be going to a mechanic and saying, well, I know it's 6,000 miles since my last oil change, but they're highway miles. If we thought that was the only vehicle we were ever going to own, we would be taking the utmost care of that vehicle. Well, interestingly, everyone in this room, I don't see anybody for whom I don't think this is true, knows that this is the only one of these vehicles that we will ever get. Yet this is what we routinely, culturally, do with it every single day. So this is about reframing how we treat something that we really do need to last for a really, really long time. And how's all this working? Well, just a commentary on that. Every single year, about 12 million adults who seek outpatient care are actually misdiagnosed. 1 out of every 3 children born today will, not might, will develop diabetes over the course of their lifespan. 60% of Americans are actually defined as being overweight or obese according to their BMI, and 60% of Americans get very little, if any, exercise on a daily basis. So even those of you that called yourself a 1 or a 2 on the knowledge scale of functional medicine, I'm pretty sure even there we could all agree that these last 3 slides are not necessarily a formula for success. Would we be agreed on those things? Yet knowing, some of us knew all of this, some of us were familiar with some of it conceptually. Knowing all of this to be true, it's really tricky sometimes to find a way to introduce a different kind of care, to look at things through a different lens without understanding what's available in the community in terms of people that can help you do that. So with that comes something called functional medicine. And if you are looking for sort of a definition, if when you go home tonight a friend calls and says, oh yeah, I know you went to that thing tonight, what do they do there anyway? What is functional medicine? Well, functional medicine is personalized medicine dealing primarily with prevention and underlying causes instead of symptoms for serious chronic disease. And our tools in the toolkit, we mentioned pills and surgery in the world of reactive medicine. Our tools are things like nutrition and medical grade supplementation, things that will allow the body to do what it does best, which is ultimately heal itself. Personalized medicine is important. We are all biochemically individual, and this idea that there would be any one thing that fits all of us perfectly just wouldn't be an accurate statement. So here it's very much about looking at labs, understanding what's true of you historically, and understanding how your body functions and reacts to things. And then obviously I've been using the words proactive and reactive here. It's not only about, well, let me ask this question. How many of you in the room have ever had a headache? It's usually 100% of hands. And just generally speaking, what do people do when they have a headache?
They touch their head.
What's that?
They touch their head.
They do sometimes. They bury it. They're massaging it sometimes. But yeah, they take something, ibuprofen, what else? Aspirin, Excedrin, Tylenol. I mean, if you go into Target or CVS or the hotel lobby, for crying out loud, there are plenty of choices available to you. And most people will wait, I don't know, about 10 minutes. Come on, I got stuff to do, I'm busy, I need to get rid of this headache so I can go back to my busyness. And very few people, in fact, some of us might be even peeking and saying, how many of these can I safely take in a 24-hour period? And I mean, it says 3, but really. And very few people stop and ask themselves, okay, I wonder what caused that headache in the first place. Dehydration, stress, higher low blood sugar, higher low blood pressure. Very few people understand that it's possible to understand what the cause of the headaches or the migraines is, address that, and never get a headache ever again. But that's just not the way that we've been trained up to think about things anymore. It's all about eliminating the symptom so we can get back to what we were busily doing before. So functional medicine, by definition, is root cause-based care. And if Dr. Lori were here, she'd say, really what we do, everybody, is treat inflammation. because at the root cause of things, that is what causes most of what ails people. But that shows up in all kinds of different ways. And we'll talk a little bit more about where we get some of our information here. But when your body is mad at you because it's sleep deprived or not well hydrated or stressed out, what will happen is it will create inflammation. That's your body fighting back. And that's what we're trying to do here, is put out that fire. All right, the next couple of slides represent just a way to showcase the difference or re-emphasize the difference between functional medicine and reactive care. In the world of symptom-based care or reactive care, most people go to the doctor because they have a thing. So we'll just continue along our headache idea, example. And obviously, if those are chronic, if they could be qualified as a migraine, then you will be prescribed something to take care of those, to take care of that symptom. Over time, as they continue to come back, as you continue to take other things for the side effects of that initial medication, you will ask yourself, is the problem solved? What am I really doing here? I'm continuing, as the image shows, to put a Band-Aid on something, touch the surface of something that has a much deeper root cause. And then obviously, as a result of taking multiple medications, it takes a toll on your liver and your kidneys to process all of that, which I think is something that people really underestimate. A lot of what people take is incredibly potent, and they don't stop to ask themselves often enough, what is this really doing in terms of damage? And more often than not, more drugs, more drug toxicity ultimately leads to less healthy people, not more. I am not that old. I'm older than I'd like to be, but I'm not that old. And it already surprises me how quickly in social settings conversation goes to what ails people. And whether that's the cold and flu that's going around, or it's almost like weather and then health. Am I right? So yes, it's cold outside. We live in Iowa. Now move on to the next thing. What's hurting? What do I have to get cut out? What's going on with my kids? Why are they so sick? And so on and so on. And so I've often said, if that's normal, then I don't want to be any part of that. There's got to be a different way to make sure that we're not only healthy in terms of the absence of symptoms, but in this state of health, optimal wellness, where we might be rewriting what we were predisposed to genetically, which is also possible. Now, in a functional medicine or a root cause-based care model, there are some similarities. I would say 75, maybe even 80% of our patients come here because they have something they're trying to solve for. And most common things, if you have interest in that, are gut concerns of all descriptions, hormonal imbalance, fatigue, pain. So joint pain is a very common one. Fertility or infertility, hormonal imbalance. Anything else? You got neurological concerns of all descriptions, so that's everything from ADD to autoimmune diseases, Crohn's, Parkinson's, things that MS, Alzheimer's. I mean, there are all kinds of reasons that people show up here looking for a different solution. Is anybody thinking, and if you don't feel like sharing, you certainly don't have to, but anybody wondering if there's something specific that we might address here that you're curious about? Autumn, go ahead.
Concentration?
Yeah, so that's kind of in that neurological bucket, but when we have a tough time focusing for whatever reason and all the reasons why that happens, I'd say autoimmune diseases are a big one. Today there are more than 150 named autoimmune diseases. And depending on the number of epidemiology, that's how they decide if they can name a disease, is the number of epidemiology studies that have taken place. So that number will continue to rise. But that's another big one. So that could be, some of them I already mentioned, but you see, it could also be things like Hashimoto's, so that's a big one. That's a thyroid-related autoimmune disease. If anybody can think of other ones they're curious about, please feel free to ask. Now there is about probably 25% of our patients that come here thinking, I think I'm healthy. But so did my buddy that dropped out of a heart attack at the age of 40 on the golf course. So surely there was something brewing that he or she didn't know about, and I don't want that to be my story. So in those situations, people are looking to uncover, is there something brewing that I don't know about? And what we will say in here with some frequency is absence of symptoms doesn't necessarily mean you're optimally well. It just means there are things that might be happening that haven't shown up yet. When somebody suddenly starts to react to food sensitivity, it's not because that just happened yesterday. It's because that's when the symptoms decided to show up. There's a delayed reaction. There's things that happen over time in your gut. And so a lot of times it takes some time to unravel that, but we just assume because it just started happening that it's new, and typically it isn't. So here, you have an initial assessment, what's going on, what's your benchmark, what's your baseline, and we're going to talk about what that is in terms of a lab. And then in our clinic, we'll put together a protocol or a plan of care for you. Just to give you a little bit of context, most of our restorative care plans are somewhere between 6 and 9 months in length. And components of that care plan can be things like testing and labs, and we'll talk more specifically about some of the kinds of testing that we do. Something around certainly nutrition, addressing lifestyle components, so things like stress and hydration and sleep. Medical grade supplementation. Now supplementation here can happen in pills and powders and liquids. Some of the things you see on the shelf as you were walking in. But also we have an IV therapy suite on the east side of our office, and later on you have an opportunity to walk around and kind of see what it's like around here. Obviously we're open for business tonight, so you may also see some patients back there, and they don't mind, they're used to it. But we introduce supplementation also into the body intravenously, and we'll talk about the benefits of that here in a little bit. So IV therapy is not necessarily reserved just for emergency situations, or at least not here. And then some touch points or some reevaluation components. Every now and then someone will say, you know, I went to a clinic like this. I don't always know what they mean by that. But Colorado, Arizona, California, Florida, and they say, you know what, I did all this testing, spent all this money, they put me on all these supplements, and I have no idea if they're working. Well, in our mind, that would not be a good way to manage your care. You want to check in every now and then and say, is what I'm doing working? And if not, why not? And rechart that course whenever you need to. So that's what we mean by reevaluation. During that 6 to 9 month period, you would have that reassessment or that reevaluation usually about every 90 days or so. So a repeat of that initial panel, which again we'll talk about, to say, okay, how are we doing so far? And also give you some science, some scientific proof that you are making progress. Because some of you also know that symptoms can be lagging or leading. So sometimes your labs will look better, but you still won't be feeling all that awesome. And that's okay, because feeling awesome will come if you're just patient. Other times the reverse is also true. In fact, some of you may have had experience where you tackled something and you thought, okay, I'm good now. Let's just pretend for a second it's some sort of injury. Anybody have an athletic injury of some sort before? And how sometimes we think, oh, I'm good, it's fine. Doctor said I should be off of it for 3 weeks, but it's 2 weeks, it doesn't hurt anymore. And then the second that you get back on it doing your thing, what happens? Swelling, your body rebels again. And so sometimes we get a little too comfortable and think, oh, you know what, my stomach hasn't been upset in a while. I think I'll just reintroduce that into my diet. And you realize, oh, maybe that wasn't a good idea. Maybe my body really doesn't like that. All right, as we switch gears just a little bit and talk about functional medicine in a different light, you'll see a phrase at the top of that screen. It says, all disease begins in the gut, and it's a quote. And the guy who said it, his name is Hippocrates, and as many of you know, he's not a contemporary of ours. Which means that when people say to me, oh, functional medicine, this is the new way of doing medicine. It's not new at all. It's been around for a long time, but as those first 3 slides indicated, in all kinds of ways, we've sort of lost our way. And what he said was true, still is true, and we're going to talk exactly about why that is here in the next few minutes. 70%, some would even say 80% of our overall wellness immune system starts in the gut, your microbiome, your digestive tract. You pick the fancy word that you like. And when things don't go well, here's why. So on that top line here in the schematic labeled Digestive Health, you see some things we've labeled triggers. And this is by no means an exhaustive list, but here are some of the kinds of things that could be. Things like stress, toxins, food particles, pathogens, drugs, infections. I'm fairly certain that I'm the only one in the room that ever experiences any sort of stress, so we can just sort of tuck that one aside. But this is a list of things to which we are exposed every day, all the time. Unless we live in a bubble, never go anywhere, grow our own food, I mean, you name it. And some people are trying and kind of making themselves crazy doing it. This list of items is simply not avoidable. Now, as it relates to the middle one, food particles, that can really show up as a trigger in a couple of different ways. One, sometimes the system isn't functioning properly. So you may eat and things get stuck somewhere along the way. So we have a lot of patients that struggle with chronic constipation and things of that nature. Secondly, food can be a trigger because sometimes we're consuming things that our body doesn't like, but we don't know it. So there's an impact that we're just not aware of. And so that's another way that food can be a trigger. And this actually shows up for people that think they're eating healthy. So I'll give you an example. We do not subscribe to any one style of eating or one way of eating. People ask us, are you strictly paleo? Or what do you think of keto? Or what about AIP or Whole30, which by the way should probably be whole life. But people call it a victory when they make it through a month. Now there are a few things that we would offer probably no one should consume, and I can give you that short list. But for the most part, gluten, dairy, soy, refined sugar, but I think we all know that's probably not the best thing for us, and also legumes. So beans should be, let's say, eaten, consumed in moderation. So for some people, they're like, okay, that's strict paleo. Well, maybe, but here's the other thing. When people are, as an example, trying to eliminate dairy from their diet, what are many people replacing that with today? Soy, potentially, exactly right. And what else?
Almond milk.
Coconut milk, almond milk. And so they're thinking, oh, I'm eating healthy. And now I'm consuming vast amounts of almonds because almonds are the perfect food. Almond milk, snacks, because it's a good healthy fat. And then some of those individuals have food sensitivity testing done here, and guess what their bodies don't like? Almonds. So in an effort to be healthy, they've actually headed right in the direction that their body, for now or for a time or permanently, doesn't respond well to. So it's more important that you understand what your body's doing and what works well for you than it is to just subscribe broadly to something just because everybody else is doing it or because everybody says intermittent fasting is the great thing. It can be for some people, but you have to understand what's right for you specifically. Well, as this middle section describes, there are intestinal mucosal cells. So there's a mucosal lining on the inside of your gut. And the entire purpose of that lining is to keep the bad guys, the bad stuff, in. So think of it this way. When you eat, one way in, digestive system, breaking down, body's using what it needs as fuel, and then one way out. That's the idea. Everybody with me? I'm not going to draw you a picture. Now what happens though over time with these triggers is they start to erode. That was kind of a delayed response, but at least you laughed.
That was a joke I didn't say.
This mucosal wall, as a result of these triggers, becomes eroded. So I like to think of it as that barrier being under attack over time. So it's going to thin out. And then even after a while, develop microscopic tears, pinprick size holes in that lining, permitting the bad guys, the waste, the toxic stuff that comes from what's left over from our food, to seep through that gut wall. It's like cheesecloth, or it's like an oozing, I like to think of it as a sponge. And now it's all of that is out into our bloodstream. So that creates inflammation, as we talked about earlier. And it's also why suddenly other things that we do here will make sense. So if you come in and you say, Christina, I've got chronic headaches, and we say, oh, we should look at your gut. Or you say, I've got a terrible rash, and we say, oh, we should look at your gut. Or I've got joint pain, oh, we should look at your gut. Unless you understand this connection and why this happens, those kinds of things don't make sense to people. But once they realize, oh, the gut lining can become damaged, and now what's supposed to be just in there and eliminated from my body can get out and wreak havoc, that totally makes sense. And the beauty part of what's possible is we can actually spackle those holes and over time rebuild that lining and regain the integrity of this mucosal wall, which is so, so, so important to our overall health. How many of you have heard of intestinal permeability or leaky gut? And isn't it interesting, we had a room filled with ones and twos on that. I don't really know much about functional medicine, but anymore, leaky gut or intestinal permeability is very common language. And that's what people mean when they say that. It's not a gash, it's not a gaping hole. It's over time this erosion of our gut lining that permits the bad guys, the waste inside of our gut, to seep out into the rest of our bodies. There's my very non-scientific description. What do we think? It makes sense, doesn't it? Absolutely. Now, as we move forward, let's talk a little bit about how all of that stuff, all of that background relates to the patient journey here. And when I originally had this slide, somebody helps me with all the graphic stuff. I talk for a living, I don't necessarily do this. And the initial draft said Functional Medicine Expressway. And I went, I don't know if that's the best description of what we do. Any thoughts on why that might not be best?
Because your body is always changing.
Yes.
If one route is the right way to go right now, it's going to change all the time.
True. Absolutely. Absolutely. And just simply to piggyback off what you said, it's not fast. Mm-hmm. And so when we have gotten used to this idea of taking an ibuprofen and now my headache is gone in 10 minutes, we have to remind people that what we're doing here is not solving for a symptom. It's figuring out what's causing that to happen and fixing that. So there are really two things here that drive how long patients stay. One, how long they've been sick, and two, how compliant they are. I can give you supplements, I can give you nutrition recommendations, not me personally because I'm not clinical. But we can tell you what you should do, but I'm not able to be at your house at the dinner table putting a fork in your mouth with the right stuff on it. Now, it's so interesting. The first thing he said when he peered at the food is, does this have gluten in it? And we always get that question. In fact, on Saturday mornings, sometimes we have donuts. And they're from a company called Sweet Treats Without Wheat. Are you familiar? They're often at the farmer's market. And it's still so funny that people would think that we would serve them something that we ourselves wouldn't eat. But the reason we have food here is we want people to know that really good food is available, even when you strip gluten, dairy, soy, refined sugar, legumes from your diet. Because people will say, well, what's left? Well, a lot. A lot. Not Skittles. They're off the table. But lots and lots of really good, nourishing food that tastes delicious is still available. We just have to reintroduce people to that concept. So let's let's talk a little bit more about the patient journey, what it's like, what you can expect, and so on. I know that you guys, I think, got here after I said this, but there are some paper and pens. If you want to write down, use your phone, whatever you want to do, I just want you to know it's available. All right, so obviously on this first step, we have what's called a discovery period. So you're in it. You came tonight to check us out. Am I going to be one of 3 people here? I think you asked me how often do you do this, and I said, 4 or 5 times a month. And you went, really? So for about the last 4 years, we have been doing these sessions almost on a weekly basis, and I have anywhere from, this is probably on the smallish end. I think we had a snowstorm a couple Saturdays ago that shrank the crowd quite a bit, and sometimes I have 40. So who knows? I still can't figure out why there's 40 some days and 12 in others. But you do the math. So that means that some number, usually between 50 and 100 or so people, are coming here to figure out what the heck we're doing here on a monthly basis. So discovery is, what's this clinic about? Do I feel comfortable here? What are the people like? What kind of information are they sharing? Does what she's saying make sense? Intuitively or intellectually. But then there's a period of discovery about you. So you'll hear us refer to the functional wellness panel or the Livewell panel. It is your benchmark, your baseline narrative. It's the entry point into this clinic. It is 22 different tests, about 65 different markers. Some of you that have had significant amounts of blood work understand the difference. So usually lab panels are made up of tests, which are made up of markers. And that is $449 and includes the office visit that goes with it. So you can't get a lab here without someone telling you what it means. So every time you're quoted a price on a lab, you'll have an opportunity for 45 minutes or so to have a clinical visit. Then someone will say, here's what this means. So we call that the discovery lab because it really just is your baseline. What's happening in your body right now? And it's blood work, and it directionally will tell Dr. Zach or Dr. Lori where we need to look further. So it does not have food sensitivity tests in it. It does have some markers that generally point to gut health or lack thereof. A lot of times when I read notes from those appointments, it will say things like probable food sensitivity, probable autoimmune concerns, probable metabolic syndrome, probable. So that word probable means that Dr. Lori is saying there's something here on the surface that means the root cause is likely here, but as she puts together that restorative plan of care, she will include tests that will be able to determine that with certainty. So those restorative care plans include additional tests to find out for sure. So as we move from discovery into restoration, that's where that 6 to 9 month period comes into play. Some of the tests that I see in the restorative care plans are things like gut testing. So 97-98% of you-ish will probably have a stool analysis. Because if 70 to 80% of your overall health starts in your gut, well, where do we need to look to find out? So that's again a panel. It's yeast, parasites, infection, inflammation, good and bad bacteria, and on and on and on and on it goes. So what's happening right now in your gut? Hormone testing, heavy metal toxicity testing, precancer. We have a test that we use for precancerous cells in small numbers. We have autoimmune panels. We have blood-brain barrier panels. Does anybody have any interest in a particular test that you would like to know if we do or you would have access to here as a patient? Yes, ma'am.
The thyroid.
Yes, thyroid markers and more comprehensive panels that include, yes, absolutely, 100%. No? Okay. You're like, there was like some chatter and I wasn't sure.
What about like liver enzymes?
Yeah.
And stuff like that? Okay.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
The test for inflammation, I mean, how does that happen? Does this say you're inflamed in your hands or your feet, or is it just something?
So I want to be cautious and say I'm not a clinical person. And so sometimes even if I think I know, I think it doesn't make sense for me to say because I'm not a nurse or a doctor, although I've been around here a long time. I just like to think of inflammation as a sign of something underneath. And so yes, a lot of the testing that we do will say where that inflammation is. and point the clinical team to a solution that would make sense for you. And again, the solution can be food, it can be supplementation, it can be lifestyle changes. So if stress is wreaking havoc and cortisol levels are out of control and adrenals are crazy, then you're going to have to figure that out. So probably my biggest cross to bear, at least one of them, is sleep. And I love to sleep, but I also like to do. Anybody with me? About 6 weeks ago, I became a 3rd grade homeroom mom, and I have no idea how that happened. There's something about me that just, I have sign me up written on my face. And so I'm busy. I do things. And so one of the things that I have to pay attention to is making sure that I give my body that restorative rest that it needs. And it's my fault. It's my problem. It's mine to fix when that's not going well. So we talk a lot about stress management and sleep habits and hydration and things like that as well. In this restorative care plan, so this is the nitty-gritty about money. There are a couple of factors, I think. I mentioned how sick you are, how long you've been so. So we have a lot of actually pediatric patients here, more than I ever imagined we would. And on the one hand, it's sad that kids are sick so early, but on the other hand, they get better really fast. Because they're not like some of you who might be able to say, I haven't felt well a day in 17 years. So there's a lot more to unravel if you've got 15, 20 years of stuff to unpack versus a little one who might have just been struggling with something for 8 to 12 months. So restorative care plans range in price based on what's in them. So we have something that's called a foundational care plan, and so that would be the person who honestly, they've been going through the McDonald's drive-thru every day till they darken the door of this room. They don't even know what gluten is, and so now I'm going to talk to them about avoiding it, and it's going to make their head turn on its axis. And so I like to think of that as just this very elementary, we're going to talk about nutrition, we're going to relearn some things, we're going to check in periodically and see how we're doing with that. Supplements would be included, health coaching, which is another service that we offer here, support system for you to do that. And then for those that are ready and need way more extensive care, we have a restorative care plan that might be $6,500. And that might have 3 to 5 additional labs. It might have 18 IV therapy sessions. It would also have health coaching. It would also have all kinds of other things to kind of take a look at what's going on and why it's happening and how to fix it. So I would say on average, and it's hard, and a pediatric care plan is probably $2,500 to $3,500. So I would say a lot of adults who are ready, so who have maybe already made some dietary changes, as you likely have, or you wouldn't have asked me that question when you came in here. If you already have that foundation in place, then you will likely be ready for something bigger. So I would be thinking about if I'm willing to make changes and I'm able to do that, and Dr. Lori says, here's all the things I would like to see, I would be prepared for something in that $5,500 to $6,500 price range. But there are other options for you if that's not right for you at this time. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that there's a lot of, and that's not squishiness, but that's the word that's coming to me. Now, a couple of things while we're on money. One, you had specifically asked about insurance. We do not process insurance here. So this is a self-pay clinic. It's not because we don't wish insurance would cover it. It's because most of what we do is not covered by insurance. So we would have a bunch of people trying to get you money back, increasing the cost of what happens here, and probably not having that happen any more frequently than it does today. However, all of your invoices will have CPT codes and diagnostic codes on them, which means that if you want to file a self-pay claim, you absolutely can do that, and you may get money back. Now, if you do, it will likely be on blood work and stool analysis. It will likely not be on things like food sensitivity and IV therapy. So there are things that are more commonly covered by insurance when people do choose to submit those. We do offer in-house financing. So payment, yes, through Care Credit, if that's something you choose to do, that's an actual credit card that you apply for, receive a credit limit. Some people actually come to the clinic with those accounts because their kids had braces or cosmetic dentistry or something in their life that was not covered by insurance, and that prompted them to have such an account. For lots of other people, it looks like a conversation with Bobby, who's our Director of Patient Services. It sounds like, okay, here is Dr. Lori's recommendation. Here are the price tags associated with all of those elements she'd like to have you involved with. Here's what that looks like financially. What works for you and your family? So down payments, monthly payments, the rates and levels of all of those vary significantly. I've seen people pay just a few $100s a month, and I see people all the time just get their Disney points or their Costco dollars and use a credit card to pay for it. So all I want you to know there is there's a fair amount of flexibility. Now, if you have HSA or flex spending accounts, you are in very good company. It's the #1 way that people pay for care here. So back to your insurance question, for a lot of people, insurance means, yeah, that whole deductible copay world, but also many people have an HSA or flex spending account that's either self-funded or funded by their employer. So please know that most people do leverage those funds for care here as well.
It varies here how much we pay for your services and stuff, but when you change your diet, that's going to change your budget too.
That's true.
Do you have an idea of how drastic that usually is?
So even though it's cheaper to make a grilled cheese with Wonder Bread and a Kraft Single, when people are eating out a lot of their meals, you can certainly cook with healthy food for the same money as eating out cost. So I think we have to be a little bit careful about apples to apples versus apples and pigs comparison, I always say. Now, ramen noodles or Chef Boyardee or whatever is available out there that's inexpensive is certainly going to be less costly than organic veggies and well-sourced protein. Now, I will also say a couple of things. One of the things that Melissa does, our health coach, does really, really well is help people with that very thing. So how can you do this on a budget that's reasonable for your family? I would say that in my home, I have a family of 4 and 2 of them are kids. But I probably spend at the grocery store at Hy-Vee or Trader Joe's or Whole Foods, I don't know, maybe a third to a half, again, more than a lot of my friends. But we eat out once a week as a family. So if we were to compare kind of the food budget in total, I would imagine that we're pretty close to being equal. Now, the other thing I like that he mentioned is, one, we don't drink soda. So filtered water is cheaper than the cases of pop that I see coming out of the grocery store. And I think that satiation points change when you eat healthy food. Somebody said, you know, you can eat a whole bag of chips. You probably won't eat a whole bowl of apples. Because the satiation point arrives sooner when you're actually giving your body what it needs. So I think quantity goes down over time, which is, I think, another factor in cost. I'm trying to think what else affects it. I mean, I would want you to take a look at all of that. How many times do I run through the Starbucks line? How many times do I eat out? What's my grocery bill? And then Melissa is also really good at saying, okay, has anybody heard of the Dirty Dozen or the Clean 15? Okay. So as you make choices about organic produce or not organic, for example, if you are going to eat the whole thing in its entirety, like a strawberry, probably makes sense to buy organic. If you're going to peel it, like a banana or an avocado, and there's a nice thick protective barrier, that might be an example of a food where you could just go conventional. So she's also really good at saying, okay, in order to help manage expense, buy organic on these things, but maybe you can be a little more flexible on some other things. So there's a lot of different ways you can manage it to make it reasonable for your budget.
What's her name?
Melissa Reisinger is our health coach, and she's a great resource for budgets and meal planning. And I know for, like, at our house, I'll make a giant crock pot of like some sort of soup, and then we just have it for a long time, but half of it in the freezer. Sometimes it's cooking in quantities that can make it cost effective. There's lots of tricks. Natural grocers. When meat gets close to expiration, they put it in the freezer and then they put it on sale. So sometimes just understanding the sales cycle of different grocery stores we have in the community. My new favorite thing is there's this company that has realized that consumers really like pretty fruits and veggies. So they're buying up all the ugly ones and selling them for cheaper, but they taste just as delicious. Have you guys seen that? They're like half the price. And they sort of look like what they would look like if we didn't put wax all over them to make them shiny and all that stuff. Co-ops, food co-ops are a great resource, buying eggs directly from farmers and things like that.
So is organic food a integral part of the plan?
I would say that it's something that we talk about.
The
So-
reason I say that is because my kids were home for Christmas and my daughter has 1,000 problems with her diet. And she was home for 10 days and we went to groceries. I spent $130 on food for her that would basically fill 2 grocery sacks.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, the stuff, organic food at that store is just outrageous.
Now, organic food at that store is cheaper than organic food at the rest of the stores in town.
I just couldn't believe the price.
Yeah, Natural Grocers is actually cheaper than Whole Foods.
And maybe not Fresh Time.
Fresh Time, you know, I don't spend a lot of time there, but I hear very good things. And this is exactly where I would say Melissa is a good resource, because she's going to say this is worth buying organic and this is not. But here's what I also just proposed to you to think about. You know, we're going to go to all this effort to clean up, to avoid gluten as an example, and then consume food that's laced with chemicals and pesticides. I mean, it seems a little counterintuitive to me that you wouldn't at least try to address a little of both. But I say everything, every bite you eat, every meal, every grocery store run you make is a good, better, best decision. So do I think that conventional produce in your diet is better than McDonald's drive-thru? 100%. 100%. So you just make those decisions based on resources that are available to you, tricks you might know around town, and then that's all you can do.
And I think at first too, like people always go for the, they always go for those like organic snacks that are super expensive instead of just getting produce and making a meal, and that goes much longer.
Or making your own trail mix and nuts and dried fruit and whatever. You're right. That's the other thing too. Processed food is more expensive than real food.
She loves processed food. So I have a question about
Yeah.
the money. I think on your website, I think I saw a chart.
Oh,
that
from
indicated-
like an annual care plan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like beginning January 1st,
Yeah.
it's a 12-month.
I can talk a little bit about that too. So over here, after restorative care, we have what's called an annual care plan. So that's like a membership. So if it's helpful, I like to think of restorative care as your get out of trouble plan, and the annual care plan is your stay out of trouble plan. So now, if you have your initial blood work done and you actually are relatively healthy, you could, in theory, go straight to that. And those plans range from $99 to $199 a month, which is probably what you saw. But I also see restorative care plan payments that hover around that as well. So one is just sort of the continuation of the other. When people have finished their restorative care period, a lot of them will say, heck, I kind of like this, and I like this lens through which I'm looking at health. I don't really know if there's a good fit now with my primary care practitioner. What do I do to essentially swap that out? And so that's where that shows up. People that just come here for maintenance. Their annual physicals, a couple of blood draws a year, access to IV therapy, discounted supplements, health coaching resource as needed, and so on.
We go over what the health coach does.
Oh, it's kind of a what doesn't she do? So for some people, she's a meal planner. For some people, she's a grocery store tour guide. For some people, she's an accountability partner. For some people, she's a cheerleader. For some people, she's an information gatherer. For some people, she's an educator. So she is, her goal, her role is to just be for people whatever they need to be successful. So she feels a lot of questions that are related to, is this normal to be feeling this way on this sort of supplement? But she also just checks in with people and says, I know you've been having a hard time with the cleanse. How are you doing? How can I help? I know last time we talked about the fact that you don't drink enough water. And we talked about some tricks associated with that. How are you doing? So that's her goal. She's probably would say to some people she's a counselor of different hats that she wears. Other questions about process, money, resources, services? As a final element, we feel very strongly about what we do. We know that it works, but every now and then someone will say, do you have any sort of money back guarantee? I mean, again, compliance is a really big deal, so I can't make you do what I want you to do. But what I will tell you is when you invest that initial $449, when you sit down with Bobby and talk about what Dr. Lawyer, Dr. Zach's recommended for your restorative care plan, when you proceed with care, we do give you your $449 back. So we do apply that to your ongoing care thereafter. So that's sort of a way to give a guarantee, I guess, of sorts. Yes.
Look at that again.
Sure. So I'll just follow this. Let's say tonight you said, I came ready, still ready. I believe in what you're doing. It feels like a good fit. I'm going to put essentially $449 on the line to see what you have to say. So then you come back a couple weeks later. That's a long visit, by the way, that follow-up appointment. Very long visit, like couple 3 hours. So get ready. But we'll go over your medical history. You'll meet with a nursing team. You'll meet with Dr. Lori. She'll, based on your initial lab, figure out what else we need to investigate, put together a restorative care plan. And that's the one that includes health coaching and IV therapy and different labs and supplement protocols and so on. So that's that 6 to 9 month package that I mentioned for many of you. And that's the one that can have up to a $6,500 price tag. So then after that, and then by the way, if you say, okay, put my $449 on the line, I get it, I understand, this makes sense, I'm going to do the care plan, then we apply that $449 to that second bill. And then beyond that, now I'm finished with restorative care. I'm either optimally well or well on my way to being healed, if you will. And then you have another decision point. Do I want to stay here, or do I feel like I can probably continue this without support from this clinic? So that's when people enroll in those annual care plans that you saw mentioned on the website. And I do know they're there, and I hate that they're confusing sometimes, but that's what that is.
So what percentage of the individuals who come here don't go any farther than the discovery
Oh.
point?
I'll just backtrack because this is what I do, so I know a lot of these statistics. I would say overall, about 50% of people that come to class will book a blood draw that night. An additional number of them will decide within about 180 days that it's right for them. So keep in mind, I've given you information. So now it's like, oh, I get a bonus in April, or I get a tax return, or people start to think, okay, I had the information. Now I can plan. So we continue to have those people schedule blood draws for up to 6 months from now. And then from that, we have about 75% of people from the blood draws that proceed with some sort of restorative care. I think last time I checked it was 72, but I'm rounding. Permit me to do that. And then we have very, very, very little attrition within restorative care. Usually it is catastrophic life events, so divorces, relocation, job loss. I mean, things that are significant where people will say, something happened and I can't do this right now. But most people that embark on some sort of plan stay the course and complete that out. And then we probably have, 150, 200 patients in that annual care plan program, and it's new. It's probably only been around about 6 months. So you have to think, if you think about how you have to get there, so all those people have been through care, are better, and decided to stick around.
So if I had that consultation with that doctor,
Dr. Lim,
and then it's not like she would say, now, if you sign up today for the recovery, for the restorative plan, I'll give you 10% off. Or
Price will be the same.
Can I just think about it for a
Yeah,
month?
price will be the same whenever you decide to come back. Only risk, I guess, is that you're worse than you were today. But no, there's no kind of one time only, next 15 minutes. We'll give you a second one for whatever those late night infomercials. No, that's the same. I guess the only thing that might happen if you waited long enough is if our lab prices go up, our prices to patients go up, and that happens every year. So there's that, I guess.
And that's
Yeah,
expenses.
it's like if I go to Come and Go tomorrow and I'm like, it was cheaper yesterday. Well, I mean, I should have ventured out in the cold and pumped gas yesterday instead of waiting. I mean, to some extent, there's some factors that happen. Yes, you had a question?
49, you say it's applied to, like, if they suggested you're 6,500,
Yeah.
then the bill becomes
$66,051 or
so it's
something.
kind of like a refund.
Yeah, it is a refund towards care. Yeah. I love all the questions. All right. Quick summary slide, and then I'll answer questions as a group, give you a tour, answer questions individually, whatever you guys feel like you need most. Science-based field of healthcare grounded in a few key principles that I want you to walk away knowing with certainty. We are all biochemically individual. So we are not all the same, and this idea that there's any sort of one-size-fits-everybody approach is ludicrous. So whether you're talking about diet or some specific protocol or some magic pill or magic thing you drink that you saw online or whatever, there just isn't any sort of thing like that. We're very much focused on patient versus disease-centered care. Yes, it is our goal that you be disease and symptom-free. But we also spend a lot of time, give a lot of attention to the whole person. Stress, sleep, hydration, all of those things. And because we view health as a positive vitality, not just the absence of disease. There are a lot of people walking around asymptomatic. They do not have a diagnosis of any sort, but they are not healthy. And there are things brewing that they may not know about that need to be addressed. And they aren't, and then someday they'll just show up and people will wonder, what the heck, where did this happen? Why is suddenly my thyroid out of whack? Well, it's because there has been damage being done over time that we just didn't look at and didn't know to address. So what else do you feel like you need to know? What did I not cover for you to have what you needed in terms of information tonight?
How much is the blood draw? How much do I get my results right after? Or do I,
449 is the blood draw.
Alright.
And your follow-up appointment will be about 2 weeks from that date. So that's how long it takes to process, but also it comes, and you may be accustomed to a phone call from somebody, everything looks normal. This blood panel comes with a functional health report that's many, many pages in length. So when you come back, you'll have a discussion about what that is, what that means, and then what you do about it, of course, is the next part of that conversation.
And how much blood do they take so I'm not surprised?
Oh, really? You want to ask that question in front of everybody?
Well, if I have a football game or something.
It's fasting, and it's about 6 vials.
Okay.
You can't be under 65 pounds. But you know, once the needle's in there, what's the difference, right? Right.
The difference is just what you have to do the next day.
Yeah,
That's-
probably so.
And that visit, the 2 weeks after
Is included in the
3 hours.
449. That's the Mac Daddy, I call it. I use very scientific language.
So on this, the 2 to 3 hour visit, they
Yeah.
tell you
What the blood work says, what the recommendations are for a restorative care plan, all the money associated with that, those items that are recommended, and then you leave with scheduled appointments and kind of a plan of action for the
they tell
next.
you if you're likely to get better or likely not to get better.
I get this question a lot. Does everybody get better? And I'll go back to my caveat. It depends on what you do. So I have seen amazing things happen in very, very short order. People that were diabetic who cut their A1C in half in a period of 90 days, but they follow the plan to the letter. So some of this stuff is they're not things that you can just sort of do halfway. There needs to be a commitment to it, which is why I talk a lot about readiness. Because if you spend $6,500 and don't do any of it, it's a waste of your money. But if you spend that money and you do what you're told to do, there's no question as I'm standing in front of you today that things will change. Absolutely no question. And I see it happen time and time and time again, whatever those things are. So people that are able to get completely off of thyroid meds, people's hormones are no longer out of whack, diabetics who don't have to go on insulin, people have babies that thought they couldn't. I mean, you name it. Cancer, lots and lots of, they don't get cancer. They solve for cancer.
The banner on your...
We what?
We created life.
I would love it. I love it. Yes,
Yeah.
we give you your life back. You know, people that don't feel well, that affects their quality of life. So we do it.
Levels up.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So the 2 to 3 hours is just, here's what we found.
Here's what we
It's not,
found.
Here's what you need to do.
Oh yeah, it's both.
Okay.
Yeah. Here's what we found. Here's what you should do. Yes, I want to do that. Okay, here's how we pay for it. Here's some appointments. You leave with your cleanse if that applies. I mean, there's a lot of, you're well prepared at the end of that 2 or 3 hours to know exactly what the next 6 or 9 months is going to look like.
Are they prepared for, like, what if the person has gone to 2 or 3 doctors and they have medicine
Oh, yeah.
from those?
Medicine, you can bring outside labs. Anybody fall in that category? We have extensive blood work from other doctors or lab work from other doctors. So labs is everything other than blood, in case that's confusing to people. So
I would.
yeah, you would. So bring them and send them in advance if you want to, for us to take a look at them and consider that in the plan. If you have something similar that you just had done a couple weeks ago, then it obviously makes sense for us to consider that. Yes?
How long did you say you guys have been here?
So the company's been around 15 years. We've been in this particular location, in this space, about 3. We were upstairs in about 800 square feet for 2 years prior to that. And then in Waukee off of Berkshire Parkway. Do you know where that is? Prior to that. So we have, the company's been around a long time, but it looks different.
This sort of thing for
15 years. Yeah. Dr. Zach has been doing that the whole time. Dr. Lori is a DO, so we have a DO and a DC by original education, I guess. Now they're both certified functional medicine practitioners, so both paths led to the same place. And you know, they just provide very different background and very different experience, and they work really well together as a team. The fact that we have a DO is beneficial because as people want to wean off of their meds, she's able to help write those scripts, which obviously a DC in the state of Iowa is not able to do. So he used to have to say, you know, take this lab to your endocrinologist and have them adjust the dosage. They didn't always take well to that.
I wonder.
What's more common, getting off your meds because you got better, or not having side effects from your meds because you're doing something that counters it?
Both. So because so many of people's meds are because of one of the other meds they're taking, as you take less of that original medication, you'll have fewer side effects. So both things are happening. 1, you're healing, but 2, you're also just needing less of it, which reduces the side effects from them. But it is a goal for most of our patients to no longer have to take those. I mean, that's most people want that. You had something else?
I was just curious, do people ever have a new type of experience they're having that they, like an acute issue, but I don't even want to call it that because I don't want it to sound like an emergent issue, because obviously if it's something you need care right away, you'd go to your primary care provider or, you know, urgent care, whatever the issue is. But if there's something that you want to treat naturally, do you see that come?
Yeah.
People come in for that too, so not like just a routine,
Yeah.
you know.
So I'll give you some
scheduled appointment,
examples.
part of your-
Yeah, I'll give you some examples. If you go to traditional PCP and you have an ear infection, what are they going to do? Give me an antibiotic. Well, in this place, we have different strategies for the same thing. So we might be recommending liquid silver or garlic ear oil, and so there are people that will, I have a sinus infection, or I have strep throat, or I think I might have the flu. What do you do for those urgent but not emergent things? And do you have more natural recommendations to manage those? And that's absolutely another type of thing we do. I have a 9 and a 4-year-old, and neither one of them have ever been on an antibiotic. So their entire life, we've treated all those sorts of mundane childhood things other ways, which is possible and part of.
Can you have like is there a list printed out anywhere of things that can come here, or like just if something's very specific that just will
No, most people start by calling here, and then the nurses will say, you should come in, you should go to the ER, or take this and you'll be fine. So most people will call first and ask about those sorts of things. All right.
So one more question.
Yes, absolutely.
So really the way you treat people here is to have them go through this whole process, not just come in for specific things. Am I correct?
Well, it's kind of
Or
both.
if they come in for specific things in their process, but they have to start, and if anybody wants to come here, they have to go through this process.
Specific things like the kind of thing that she mentioned, yes, you do have to be an annual care plan member, or you have to be a patient here of some sort to be treated for strep throat or a sinus infection. But when you are, you get that too. So we don't have kind of an on-demand practice for people that just want a natural way to handle the mundane things of life. If we have some people to whom we refer, there are some practitioners in the community that have family practices that are more leery of prescribing antibiotics quickly and things like that. So if somebody's just really looking for a PCP that's more open-minded, we can give you those sorts of recommendations. But most people here start with something they need to solve for themselves.
I wouldn't mind those recommendations.
IV therapy, does
Yeah.
that fall, you can't come here just for IV?
You can come here just for IV therapy.
Oh, you can, okay.
Yes. The IV therapy panel, so there's a panel that just helps us make sure it's safe to have IV therapy. And I'll check it for you, but I want to say that's $249. It's basically got liver, cardio, a G6PD, which is a genetic marker to make sure that high dose of vitamin C are safe for you. So there's a handful of things in that IV therapy panel. And so you have that, it says it's safe, and then you start your IV therapy. So you can do that. All right, I will be here till the last one of you leave, so if you have individual questions, please feel free to grab me. Does anybody want to have a look around?